Imagine the scene, a quiet morning in Coyoacan, Mexico City, where the air carries the comforting perfume of warm tortillas and newborn coffee. It was a common Tuesday of March 2018 when Esperanza Morales, at the age of 28, was walking down Francisco Sosa Avenue holding her daughter Paloma's hand, just 3 years old. Created in a traditional Catholic family, where talking about past lives was almost a taboo, Hope would never imagine that day would forever change his vision about existence. Paloma, with his black braids swinging in the wind, jumped happy over the pavement stones, like any child of his age. He collected dolls, sang children's songs and filled the laughing house. Nothing indicated that, in a few moments, an extraordinary experience would shake the foundations of the reality that his mother knew. Suddenly a deafening roar cut the air. An old bus, from those orange Dina models that still circulate through the historic center, advanced at high speed. At the corner, a young man tried to hurry, carrying a cardboard box that obstructed his vision. The asphalt, damp by the morning drizzle, betrayed his steps. The box flew through the air. The bus braked with a desperate winch, but the impact was inevitable. The sound of the accident echoed down the street as a scream of horror. Esperanza instinctively covered Paloma's eyes, trying to spare her from the violent scene. But it was then that he felt his daughter's hand shaking with an intensity that did not match the common fear of a child. Paloma's eyes were distant, as if they said something invisible to others. Her breath was panting, as if she herself had been crushed by the wheels of the vehicle. "Mom, Mom," Paloma whispered, with a voice that didn't seem to be hers, loaded with a terror that transcended her 3 years of life. It has happened to me before." The words fell like a lightning. The ambulance sirens sounded in the distance, the crowd's shouts mingled with chaos, but Esperanza could only hear her daughter's interspersed breath and that impossible statement. Something inside her laughed. Moving away from the riot, Esperanza took Paloma to a bench in the nearby park. As he dried his daughter's tears with an embroidered handkerchief, her grandmother's inheritance, the aroma of the flower jacaranda mingled with the smoke of the cars, creating that unique atmosphere of the city center. With a shaky voice, but trying to keep calm, he asked, "My love, what did you mean by that? What do you mean, have it happened to you?" Paloma was silent for a moment, playing nervously with the loop of one of the braids. His eyes, usually full of mischief, now reflected a scared depth. When he finally spoke, his voice was clear, almost supernatural. "When I was big, Mom. When I lived in the house where they made the chopsticks that smell tasty." Esperanza frowned, confused. "Sticks who smell tasty? Do you mean incense, my love?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. My family did them. I helped put them in the boxes. And there was a man, my brother-in-law, who always brought me sweets of tamarind." Esperanza's heart fired. Paloma had never been in an incense factory. In their home, they barely used aromatic candles on special occasions. How could a 3-year-old so accurately describe a process he has never seen? "And what happened to this man?" he asked, although a part of her feared the answer. Paloma closed his eyes, and his breath was rapid again. "The bus, that orange bus like that. I was running because I was going to be late to deliver some orders. He carried a heavy box and did not see well. I slipped into the rainwater." The girl touched the right side of her chest, exactly where she had an irregular-shaped reddish birthmark that had always intrigued doctors. "The wheels passed here, Mom. It hurt a lot, but just for a little. Then I felt nothing anymore." Esperanza got up from the bench, feeling her legs weakened. This could not be happening. Her daughter described a death she never lived, with details of a life that were not part of her reality. But there was something even more disturbing, the mark on Paloma's chest, that spot that doctors always said was just a vascular anomaly. Now, listening to the daughter point out the exact place where the wheels of the bus would have hit it, a cold shiver traveled its spine. "What was your family called, my love? What did the incense do?" Paloma was thoughtful, as if he revived buried memories. "I don't remember the last name, but they made some very famous incense. They had a strange name, like old flowers. On the way back home, Esperanza watched Paloma, who had already returned to the usual cheerful child, singing songs from the school and pointing to the dogs on the street. It was as if the impossible reports had dissipated as fast as they arose. That night, after lying down her daughter, Esperanza was awake in the kitchen, taking chamomile tea and trying to sue what she had heard. Her husband, Roberto, worked on the night duty at the hospital, leaving her alone with questions that had no answer. What if Paloma's memories were real? What if, in fact, had anyone who died run over by a bus existed in an incense factory? The idea itself terrified her and, at the same time, fascinated her. But what most disturbed her was the certainty that Paloma had spoken, the naturalness with which she had described her own death. In the following days, the routine looked normal. Paloma played with her dolls, watched the designs and ate her favorite quesadillas, as if nothing had happened. But in the mind of Esperanza, those words echoed non-stop. Words. Incense with old flower names. That rainy afternoon of April, while Paloma slept her nap, Esperanza sat before the old computer in the corner of the dining room. The drops hit the window at a hypnotic rhythm, while their trembling fingers typed, "Incense Factories, Mexico City, History." The results left her without breath. Dozens of articles appeared on the screen, small family businesses that had flourished decades ago, many swallowed by the cheaper imported products, others with stories that were lost in time. But a name was repeated as an echo, ancient old Gardenia, a family business that had been operating since the 70s in the colony doctors. Esperanza's heart fired. Old flowers. Just as Paloma had said. According to the texts, the ancient Gardenia had been a prosperous factory, which specializes in artisan incense with unique fragrances. The Herrera family, owners of the business, had kept the legacy for 3 generations, until a series of tragedies forced them to close their doors in 1997. Esperanza printed everything he found, including a death note of the ex-elder, dated August 15, 1996. The title jammed her: "Incense Factory Worker Dies Run Over by Central Avenue." With trembling hands, he read every word. Gilberto Herrera Sosa, 34, an ancient employee of Ancient Gardenia, died yesterday afternoon after being hit by a public transport bus on Central Avenue. Witnesses reported that Herrera carried a product box when he slipped on the wet pavement and fell before the vehicle. The driver, in heavy rain, could not brake in time. Gilberto was the brother-in-law of the owner, Don Aurelio Herrera, and leaves widow and orphan children. Esperanza reread the text 3 times before the words made sense. Gilberto Herrera Sosa. Owner's brother-in-law. Rounded by a bus while carrying a box. Just as Paloma had described. But the final detail left her without air. The accident occurred around 4:30 p.m., when Gilberto was heading for a client in the historic center for urgent delivery. That night, when Roberto arrived from the hospital, Esperanza showed him everything. Her husband, man of science, pragmatic, heard in silence, the glasses between his fingers as he rubbed his tired eyes. "There must be a logical explanation," he murmured. "Children absorb information from places we don't even remember. Maybe she has heard something on TV or..." "And the birthmark?" Esperanza interrupted, the voice firm. "And the fact that she knows exactly how the factory worked?" Roberto fell silent. He himself had noticed how uncommon for Paloma's brand, but he had always preferred to stick to the simplest medical explanations. After a long silence, he admitted, "We need more information. If we want to understand what is happening, we have to investigate deeply." The next day, Esperanza dialed the number found in one of the articles, that of the current owner than one day F. Now the ancient Gardenia. The voice across the line sounded aged, tired. "Don Aurelio Herrera?" "Yes, who speaks?" "My name is Esperanza Morales. I know this will sound strange, but I need to talk to you about your brother-in-law, Gilberto." "It's about my daughter." There was a prolonged silence. When Don Aurelio finally answered, his voice trembled. "No one mentions Gilberto's name for years, ma'am. What does your daughter have to do with him?" Don Aurelio's house was in the modest Narvard colony with listed windows and a small garden where purple bougainvilleas leaned over a faded blue gate. Copal smell escaped through the doorway, a persistent trace of the years when his life had revolved around the incense. Esperanza arrived that Saturday afternoon with Paloma by the hand, her heart beating so hard that she swore the girl could hear him. Roberto accompanied them, one step back, the skepticism printed on his face, but the protective instinct lit. When Don Aurelio opened the door, Esperanza was surprised by his appearance. A 65-year-old man, completely white hair, hands marked by decades of work. But it was his eyes that impacted her, a deep, almost familiar melancholy, the same look that sometimes appeared in Paloma. "Come in, please," he said, moving away with a soft voice. "Sorry for the mess. I no longer receive many visits." The room was full of framed photographs and small altars with lit candles, creating a hot but longed atmosphere. On walls, diplomas and honors to the old factory shared space with a large black and white photo, several men posing in front of an industrial machine. Paloma, who had remained silent all the way, suddenly released her mother's hand and walked straight into the image. "There he is!" he shouted excitedly, pointing to one of the men in the photo. "This is my brother-in-law. He always brought me sweets." Don Aurelio froze. His eyes filled with tears as he saw the girl nominated exactly Gilberto in the photograph. How do you know who he is?" he murmured, approaching slowly with Paloma. "Because I worked with him," the child answered, with the naturalness of those who speak of the obvious. "I helped him pack the incense of jasmine and roses. He always said that I was very good at making the packages." Esperanza felt her legs weakened. Roberto paled and sat heavily on the nearest couch. Don Aurelio knelt before Paloma, studying his face with a mixture of astonishment and terror. "And you? Do you remember what the factory was like?" The girl nodded, enthusiastic. "Yes. There were very large machines that made a lot of noise, and there was a room where we kept all the boxes. And you," he pointed to Don Aurelio, "had a desk near the window, where he always had coffee in a blue cup." The old man took his hand to his chest, panting. "The blue cup." His voice failed. "No one knew this cup anymore. It was from my mother, the only thing I kept after she died. But what happened next left everyone speechless." Paloma lifted the pink blouse with such a natural gesture that it seemed to disarm the time. In the right flank, just where afternoon light incorporated like a soft spotlight, a faded half-moon-shaped birthmark was revealed. With the innocence of those who point to something obvious, she touched the stain with her small fingers and turned to Don Aurelio. "See this little sign, Uncle?" His voice was a silk thread in the heavy air. "This is where the truck wheels hurt me when I fell." The world stopped. Don Aurelio did not cry, collapsed. Tears groped deep grooves on his face like dry rivers that suddenly returned to life. With trembling hands, he pushed the chair back and dragged himself to a cabinet of mahogany darkened by time, where he kept, between dust and oblivion, a yellowish paste by the 2 decades sun. The papers inside her crackled like old bones when he opened them. "The medical report," he whispered, as if the words burned his throat. Gilberto had multiple fractures on the right side. "The main trauma," his voice broke. "Exactly here." He extended a radiograph where the broken ribs formed a map of overlapping pain, millimeter per millimeter, to the brand in the body of Paloma. The followed silence was so dense that you could cut with the bread knife that was still resting on the table. But Don Aurelio. It was not over. "There is more," the voice confessed to a thread of air. "Something we never tell anyone. Not out of shame, but because the pain was too big to fit in words." Esperanza approached, feeling that the floor under his feet had become a moldy sand. Roberto, always the skeptical, held his hand with a force that betrayed his despair for anchoring something real. "Gilberto was not my blood brother-in-law," the old man revealed, his eyes lost somewhere between the past and the present. "She was the husband of my foster sister. But we loved him as a family. And he swallowed hard. He always said that when he died, he would come back. That family love was stronger than death." Paloma solved himself from his mother and walked to Don Aurelio. When his little fingers wrapped the wrinkled hand of the old man, it was as if an electric current traveled the room. "Don't cry, Uncle Aurelio," he said, with wisdom that did not belong to his age. "I already came back. I am here. I came to visit you. The wall clock tic-tac sounded like a hammer in everyone's chest. Don Aurelio was shaking like a leaf in the wind, his eyes fixed on the child, as if he feared that he would dissolve in the air at any time. For long minutes, he remained this way, sitting, still, holding that small hand as if she were the last anchor between this world and the other. Until, finally, it murmured, "I need to show one more thing." He led them to the back of the house, where a small studio exuded the old wood in burned outbreak. The walls, impregnated with memories, seemed to breathe. Rusty tools hung from hooks like relics of a forgotten time. Gilberto hid money, Don Aurelio explained, turning stacked boxes. It was meticulous. He said that life teaches to keep for bad days. After the accident, we searched everywhere. His voice failed. We never found anything. Paloma dropped his mother's hand and went straight to a metal cabinet in the corner, as if guided by an invisible wire. Without hesitation, he crouched down and pointed to the lower back. "It's there, Uncle Aurelio. Inside a metal box, glued with tape." The old man froze. Roberto and Esperanza exchanged a look that said everything. This is not possible. With hands that trembled like a man about to touch the sacred, Don Aurelio knelt down and stuck his arm into the indicated space. When his fingers found the box, a sob escaped from his throat. "My God," he whispered, pulling a small box of tobacco, yellowed by time, with the dry ribbon-sealed corners. "After 20 years, it's here." As the aged billets slid like dry leaves between their fingers. But it was not the money that made him collapse. It was the photograph underneath, a faded image of a younger Don Aurelio, hugging Gilberto, both smiling as if the future was a promise and not a trap. "He kept it here," the old man murmured, showing the picture to Hope with trembling hands. "I gave you on my birthday 3 weeks before the accident." But Paloma was not over yet. With the confidence of those who know every inch of her own home, she walked to a lot of boards stacked against the wall and pointed out. "And below are the secret recipes," he announced, as if talking about the obvious place where sugar is kept. "The ones that Dad didn't want the competition to find out." Don Aurelio removed the boards with hands that could barely obey him. And there it was, a moisture-folded plastic paste, full of hand-written formulas with a handwriting that could only be from Gilberto. "My father's original recipes," the old man whispered, as if he were facing a miracle. "Gilberto copied them. He said that one day someone in the family would want to start over." Esperanza felt the world turn. Each word of Paloma was a key that opened doors that should be locked forever. Roberto, the man of science, sank in a ranging wood chair, his face between hands. "There is one more thing," Don Aurelio said, wiping his tears with a beaten scarf. "Something that only Gilberto knew about me." He approached Paloma, who played with the tools hanging on the wall, organizing them by colors without even realizing it. Gilberto had a craze. He continued, his voice embargoed. "I love to organize everything by shades, the unfinished, the tools, even the clothes. From the clearest to ace dark. Always." Paloma stopped. He turned to him with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime. "That's why I like to organize my pencils so much, Mommy," he exclaimed, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Do you remember? I always put yellow to black." Esperanza nodded, slow, stunned. It was true. Since Paloma had learned to hold a wax chalk, his obsession with ordering the colors had been noted and discarded as a mere children's phase. Don Aurelio led them back to the eater, where he served hibiscus water in blown glass glasses, while the sun was lying behind the roofs of the city, painting everything with melted gold. "I need to ask Paloma a question," he said finally, with gravity that made the airway. "Something that only Gilberto knew. Something I never told anyone." He approached the girl, who drank her water with an unusual seriousness for her 3 years, as if she knew that the next moment would change everything. "You remember." Your voice failed. "What was my biggest secret?" Paloma put the glass on the table. His eyes, those eyes that seemed to have seen too much, found Don Aurelio's. And then, with the naturalness of those who share confidence with an old friend, she got up, approached and whispered something in her ear. No one else heard. But the effect was instantaneous. Don Aurelio paled as if he had seen a ghost. His hands trembled with such violence that he had to cling to his chair so as not to fall. The lips moved without emitting sound, until finally a lament escaped. "It is not possible." His voice was a smoke thread. No one, absolutely no one knew that. He looked at Paloma with a mix of terror and reverence. "Like you." What did she say? Esperanza rose from a leap, the voice cut by the urgency to see the anciano crumble before his eyes. Don Aurelio struggled to breathe, as if each word were torn from his chest by invisible claws. The fingers, once firmly, are now crisped against the wood of the chair, the white joints so tight. "She said to me." The voice broke into a muffled sob. "I cried every night because I couldn't give my Carmen a child. May the pain of not being a father consumed me, until my lesser sister's parents died, and we adopted it." A break. The air in the room was dense, as if the time itself contained its breath. "And I keep the love letters I wrote to my wife to this day, under the bed, in a box of cedar. Letters I kept writing after she left." Roberto, always skeptical, felt a chill down the spine. Those details, no one, absolutely no one could know them. Except Gilberto. But that's not all. Don Aurelio wiped the tears with the back of his handy hand, his fixed red eyes in Paloma. "She also knows that Gilberto was the only one she knew. The only one who saw me collapse the night Carmen died. The only one who knew my deepest grief." Paloma didn't look away. His face, illuminated by the golden light of dusk, seemed to carry a wisdom that did not belong to his age. "Because you told me, Uncle Aurelio," she said, simple as who talks about the weather. "That night you drank too mission, because it was Aunt Carmen's birthday. You cried even to sleep on the workshop couch, and I was watching you with a blanket. You said everything, while you dreamed." The silence that followed was so heavy that even the clock on the wall seemed to cease. Don Aurelio sank in his chair as if his legs had become water. Roberto, finally shaken, approached and supported his hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both comfort and seek support. "Are you okay, Don Aurelio?" "Carmen." The name came out like a sigh, a prayer. "My wife died of cancer in '95. A year before Gilberto's accident." The old man's eyes shone with unhealthy tears. "He was the only witness to my collapse. The only soul that saw my raw pain." Paloma descended from the chair and, with light steps, went to him. Without hesitation, he wrapped him in a hug that seemed to contain decades of longing. "Don't cry anymore, Uncle," he murmured against his chest. "Aunt Carmen is okay where she is. She asked me to say that you no longer need to write sad letters." He walked away just enough to look into his eyes. "Let us now write ale letters. Stoneware. About the smell of the bread she roasted on Sunday mornings. About your laughs in the garden. About how she loved when you read poetry to her in the candlelight." Don Aurelio pulled her back, squeezing her as if she feared she would fade. Holly shook his fragile body. "She too." Paloma hesitated, as if she chose the words carefully. "She said she loves the bougainvillea garden you planted for her. That the home you chose is the most beautiful you've ever seen." Esperanza and Roberto exchanged a look. No one had mentioned Carmen. No one knew of the garden, a hidden corner in the back of the property, where Don Aurelio spent hours alone, pruning, talking to the flowers. How could Paloma know? "There is one more thing." The girl walked away from the hug, the serious eyes like an adult's. "I know why I came back." Don Aurelio's heart stopped. "Why, small?" "Because when I died, I promised you that I would take care of you." His voice was firm, without a doubt. "And because I need you to know, the incense factory can come back. The recipes are complete. I remember all important customers. Of suppliers. Even the exact smell of sandalwood that Uncle Gilberto used in the special mixture." The ancient has looked at Esperanza and Roberto, the supplicant eyes, almost desperate. "I know it sounds crazy," his voice was shaking. "But after what you just heard, is it possible that Paloma is somehow he?" Esperanza, always pragmatic, felt the tears burning in his eyes. "After what we saw today," he whispered, "how can we deny it?" Don Aurelio stood slowly, as if he carried the weight of a century in his back, and walked to the window. Outside, the Bougainville's house shook to the taste of the afternoon breeze, its almost bright petals in the dim light. "Gilberto always said that death was not a goodbye," he murmured. "It was just one door to another room of the same house." He turned to Paloma, who approached and held his hand wrinkled with a naturalness that departed the soul. "I never imagined he spoke to the letter. Do you want me to help the factory, Uncle Aurelio?" she asked, her eyes shining with a determination that didn't fit her small body. "I remember everything. And my new parents," pointed to Esperanza and Roberto, "they are very good. They will help me." It was then that Roberto's cell phone vibrated at the table, breaking the spell of the moment. The number on the screen was unexpected, Dr. Martinez. "Strange," he frowned. "She never calls the weekends." He answered, and his expression went from curiosity to the astonishment in a matter of seconds. "Dr. Martinez?" The voice was muffled, as if the air had been sucked from the room. "Are you sure?" Yes, we're home. Or almost. We arrived in an hour." He hung up the phone with trembling fingers. Esperanza had never seen him like this, not even the day they lost their first baby. "It was Paloma's pediatrician," he announced, his voice hoarse. "She said she needs to talk to us. Now." He looked at his daughter, who touched the wine stain on her arm, over her birthmark. "What is my Manchita?" Paloma raised his eyes, curious. "We don't know, me love." Esperanza pulled her close, her heart has shot. "But let's find out." Don Aurelio insisted on accompanying them. On the way back, he didn't take his eyes out of Paloma, who sang an old melody, the same as Gilberto Tarariva while working years ago. Dr. Martinez was waiting for them in the room, with a thick paste in his hands and an expression that Roberto knew well, that of a doctor in the face of something that challenged all the logic. "I apologize for invading your night," he began, adjusting his glasses with nervous gestures. "But after our conversation about the Paloma brand, I decided to investigate deeper." He opened the folder and spread radiographs on the table. He pointed to a specific area, where an irregular shadow marked the girl's ribs. "Observe this calcification." His finger drew the outline of a bone scar. "It's like an old, poorly consolidated fracture. Multiple, in fact." Roberto approached, the pale face. "This is impossible," he murmured. "Paloma never broke any bones." "Exactly," the doctor crossed her arms. "That's why I called them. These fractures do not match her clinical history. It's like they were OC. Orient, before." Don Aurelio, in silence until then, took a yellowish envelope out of his pocket. Inside, old radiographs, almost transparent of such handwriting. "Doctor," his voice was a thread of voice. "These are the radiographs of my nephew, Gilberto. He died in '96 in an accident." The doctor took the images and overlapped to Paloma's. Blood froze in Esperanza's veins when he saw. "That can't be," Dr. Martinez retreated, as if the radiographs burned. "The pattern is identical. Calcification, density, even bone deformity. It is as if they were the same person." Esperanza sank on the couch, pulling Paloma to her lap. The girl was looking at everyone with a disturbing calm, as if she already knew the answer. "What does that mean, doctor?" he asked, his voice failing. The doctor took her glasses, rubbing her eyes as if she could erase what she had seen. "In 30 years of medicine," he confessed, "I've never seen anything like that. Bone fractures leave permanent marks, but only in the skeleton that suffered them. There is no medical explanation that justifies the pattern of fracture of one body reproduces in another." Paloma released himself from his mother's hug and approached Dr. Martinez with a confidence that only one child or someone who has lived a lot could have. The clear eyes fixed on hers, the firm voice despite his young age. "Do you want to know why I have the same fractures as Gilberto?" The doctor knelt down, putting herself on the same level of the girl, as she knew that there, in those eyes, was an answer that would challenge everything she had learned.
Yes, small. I need to know. Because I am Gilberto, doctor. Only now I'm in a new body.
The silence that followed was not empty. It was dense, loaded with something that neither science nor religion could name. Dr. Martinez, a woman who had dedicated her life to dissect the truth behind the symptoms, felt for the first time speechless. Not for lack of what to say, but because any word would be insufficient. It was Don Aurelio who broke the ice, with a voice that trembled not of fear, but from an old emotion, finally released.
Doctor, would you be willing to hear a story that sounds like crazy?
A story that perhaps makes sense of these radiographs that left it unanswered. In the following hours, among cups of coffee that warmed the hands and memories that burned the soul, they told everything. The objects Paloma recognized as his own, although he had never seen them. The dates he quoted with surgical precision, as who reviews a mental calendar of another life. The secrets that only Gilberto and Carmen knew, now whispered by a 4-year-old child. The doctor noted, sometimes with the pen standing in the air, as if the weight of it were too much to the paper. As a professional, he finally admitted his fingers over radiographs as if he could decipher in them a hidden code. My formation requires me to seek a rational explanation.
But as a person. He looked at Paloma, then to Don Aurelio, and his voice failed. As a person, I can't ignore what I'm seeing. Paloma approached the old man, pulled his sleeve gently, and whispered something in his ear. Don Aurelio smiled between tears, a smile that seemed to carry decades of relief.
What did she say? Esperanza held her husband's hand, as if he feared the answer to float her. That your mission here is complete, Don Aurelio answered, turning to Roberto and Esperanza.
Gilberto returned to close cycles. To find your lost Thesar.
To give me peace about Carmen's death, and to make sure I don't stay alone. He turned to Paloma, who nodded before he finished the question.
But it also came to find a new family, wasn't it, Small?
She smiled, and that smile, so childish, so old, illuminated the room like a ray of sun after years of storm.
Yes, Uncle Aurelio. I came to have a mama and a dotting to take care of me.
But also to take care of you. He paused, wise beyond the years.
Both works are important.
3 months later, in a simple but meaningful ceremony, Don Aurelio officialized what fate was already fabric, the adoption of the Morales as his family. The old incense factory of ancient Gardenia reopened its doors, with Roberto managing the business, Esperanza designing the packaging that would make the aromas travel through the world. Oh, and Don Aurelio conveying, with trembling hands and firm voice, the secrets of the recipes that only he and Carmen knew.
And Paloma?
At the age of 4, he was the same cheerful child who played in the garden, but who, from time to time, corrected a detail in the formulas or mentioned a client from decades ago with the naturalness of those who flip into a family album. Dr. Martinez published the case into international medical magazines, turning it into one of the first serious studies on cell memory and reincarnation phenomena in Mexico. But to the Morales her as they were called, theories mattered less than the certainty that love does not know borders, not even death. On the 5th anniversary of Paloma, while colorful balloons danced among the garden's purple bougainvilleas, all vowed to have seen a translucent figure smiling from the window for a moment. Carmen Herrera, finally in peace, knowing that his love had not been forgotten. Some stories challenge logic, but confirm what the soul always knew, that true ties do not break. If this story has resonated on you, share it with someone who needs to remember that the impossible is sometimes just a matter of perspective. And if you have lived something that reason does not explain, tell us in the comments. Its story may be next to redefine what we believe is real. Be sure to subscribe to more cases that blur the line between scientific and supernatural. Because, in the end, life is made of these borders, and who has the courage to cross them?